All right. It's my first ever, maybe my last, I don't know, my first ever open office hours. So I'm just here if people want to ask questions, but I did want to start with some of the questions I typically get, and I can answer those now. So the first one is, how did you get started homeschooling? I was a public school teacher, and so I really um, valued the public school system. I had a degree in education, higher education, Spanish, speech, and a minor in religion and a licensure in English as a second language. So my plan was to teach English as a second language and use that as a ministry as well. And so that was my congregation. That was where I wanted to go to help spread the word of the Lord. And so that was my plan. Um, that didn't work out. So uh, well, it's not that it didn't work out. My husband pointed out that if something were, well, he wasn't my husband yet, but if something were to happen to him, how would I support myself? And so he said, since you're already teaching international students English, which is what I was doing, I wanted to be a religion major and be a missionary. And so then that's when I became a teacher. Okay, so I kind of got that a little bit mixed up. Anyhow, I wanted to be a missionary. He pointed out that that doesn't pay very well. And so I changed my degree to education. Then um, I turned into a teacher, right? So I was teaching junior high and high school Spanish and public speaking. I never got to teach ESL. And so I was teaching in Bryan, Texas at the middle school, very diverse school. It was like a third of each race and ethnicity and culture. And so I was teaching Spanish, and it was a very poor school. Well, I don't know. It was just, it was a little bit rougher in the district. Not a bad district at all. Just our school was one of the lower income schools. Most of the kids, I think more than half. So yeah, most of the kids were on the free lunch or the assisted lunch program, breakfast program, things like that. So um, when baby number one was on the way, which surprised us, that was not in our grand design. I was gonna do it for 7 years, teach school and have my husband finish his engineering degree. It's the whole reason we moved to College Station, Texas, was so that he could get that degree. So I quit to have the baby, right? Like I worked all the way through December, um, and I was gonna quit when, just the week before he was born, and then go back when he turned into a kindergartner. And I loved staying at home. It was just really boring in comparison to managing 80 kids a week. Or actually 80 kids a day, right? I was managing 80 kids a day, 160 kids total, because we were on that like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday. Then the next week was Tuesday, Thursday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It was so much. Anyhow, so I stayed home with my boy, my baby boy, and really missed teaching. So I put a little email out and I said, hey, does anybody need like a Spanish tutor to the homeschool group? Because I'd heard about homeschoolers. Pretty much I was sure they were psychotic. But I went ahead and put that little email out. And the next morning, I had 42 emails in my account. Back then, that was a lot. So that was 22 years ago. And so I was staying home with my baby boy. I had this little informational meeting at a local church. And I said, if you're interested, you can pay the materials fee. And people started writing me checks. And my husband was there with me. The baby was at grandma's house. And his eyes looked at me. He had a little receipt book, and he was writing out, I was $75. I thought, okay, if I can get four families with $75, that will help me to pay the room rent, the classroom rent at this local toy store that had like a game room where people could try out board games. And so I rented that space from her, and that's how it started. And my husband just looked at me like, people will pay you outside of the school system to teach their children? And so I was scared to death. And then we had tons. I don't know how many families, dozens of families. And when I split it up by age, because I thought I should do it by grade, but that didn't work with homeschoolers. So I did it by age. Most of them were like 4-year-old to 8-year-olds. And I was like, how do you teach 4 and 8-year-old? I didn't know how to do that. I taught junior high and high school. So I called up my little sister, who was a pre-K teacher, and she taught me some of the methods that she uses just in general. And I was like, okay, so I adapted it. So I learned on the fly what gets absorbed and what doesn't get absorbed, and created my own curriculum every week that we followed. I sent home little packets, and the students did their homework at home, found out what was terrible and what wasn't terrible. And I was just amazed by the high schoolers. The high schoolers, I was like, okay, this is my jam. I'm gonna do this. So I got my textbook. I use Spanish now, which I still use, y'all. This is the book I found back when, and it's the same book I use in Spanish Geniuses now. This is my textbook. This is not the same one that we used back then, but it almost looks like it, doesn't it? And so I started with this, and they were so excited. They came to class. I gave them their textbook. There was four of them, four high school teenagers, and they were just so excited to learn Spanish. I could not believe it. I went, do they make teenagers like this? I didn't know. I thought teenagers like that was synonymous with grunting and not having eye contact. I didn't know they came that way. And so I stayed after my first or second class and asked their parents and said, hey, I have this little 9-month-old. What are y'all doing? Because I want my baby to turn out like this. And they said, just homeschooling. Oh, what do you mean? And all of them, they all had different parenting styles. Some of them had multiple kids. Some of them had an only child. Some of them were adopted. There was nothing that was the same between kid by kid by kid, except they're all homeschooled. And I went, oh, well, I guess I'm going to turn into a homeschooler. And so luckily I had time. And so I hung out with all these parents of teens that had been homeschooling, some for a few years and some for the whole time. And so I was really blessed to find out, yeah, you can do it. They were so attentive, polite, energetic. They made eye contact. They talked to me like I was a human. They didn't think I was their enemy. They thanked me every single week. They thanked me for class, and their parents paid me. And so my classes were super intense because I knew that hour was all I had each week, and I needed to make it count. I made little tapes, and I would send home tapes to the students so they could practice at home. So that was that. And then one of my mentors, she was a mom of a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and twin 3-year-old girls, and they were all in my classes. And so I learned from her how to manage multiple children, and went to her house all the time with my little babies, which was great because her kids took care of my babies while I was there, and I just sat and chatted with her. It was wonderful. I just did not know kids could be that way at that point of life. And so then we just kept on having babies until we decided that was the end, and we have our 5, and I've been homeschooling ever since. So our kids have never, ever been in public school. And so now I have 2 left to graduate. I have a 10th grader and 11th grader, and I'm super blessed by the whole journey.